welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Coulee Health, for letting me have this here. I'm excited. I know initially I was a bit worried because the number was said like 7 or 8, and I'm not very good at math, but this is more than 8, and I'm happy about that. So, with that said, my name is RJ Lynch, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sports psych, mental performance, goal setting, bunch of different things in here. At the end of the day, I have two main goals. First is to have you leave here a little bit more educated, understanding on how these tools can be used both in athletics for yourself and also for those of you who are just general fitness people, like a lot of us are, how you can use that in your own life in that way. And then finally, the last piece is I want to leave you with a thing or two that you can take to hopefully have better performances, have something to chew on, think about later on down the road. So, a couple of quick things about me, understand who I am as a presenter, as a person. The first thing I always like to mention is I am a nerd, both in every kind of sense of the word, and I know how that gets laughed at, especially for the youths out there, the kiddos, that ew, nerds. Well, if you ever want to be good at something, you're probably going to be a nerd at it. If you talk to great football players, if you talk to great gymnasts, great chiropractors, I'm sure all of them are nerds about the craft. They're talking about, ooh, how do I get better at this or this? Stock market nerds are all they ever talk about is the stock market. That's how you get better at things. But it's also where I draw a lot of references from. If you want to play a fun little game, it's kind of interesting how many different movies I can quote or reference during a presentation because it will happen. I know for a fact there's at least 2 built into the presentation. The next piece is I like to say I'm a mindfulness specialist. So mindfulness is the idea of being present right here, right now, not being judgmental about it, and just kind of letting the moment be and performing in it instead of letting all the bad things before worry you. I say specialist because I've done several trainings on it, but I am far, far, far from what I would say a master of any kind in it. Then the next piece is I'm a presenter and published researcher on different things. One of the reasons I also say specialist in mindfulness is I've gotten to present on the topic at one of my national conventions, has a article published about mindfulness and team cohesion before. So I've had some of those things as well. And then finally, the most important piece, the reason I'm here is I'm what's called a mental performance consultant. I'm very careful about that word because the US is very funny about the term psychologist, and if you're not a doctor, they like to sue you if you say you're a psychologist. So I am not a doctor in psychology, so I get to say I'm a mental performance consultant. So that means I have a master's in it, just not a doctorate. So before I really get into understanding the psychology of sport, the psychology of fitness, how everything goes in, I want to relate what I do, how things are, to things you probably already do, either as coaches or as athletes or as people who just work out general fitness populations. What are things that you do right now that relate to what I do? And what it comes down to is in fitness, in sport, what we work on is this idea of being physically competent at things. This is one of the big organizations put out this list of skills of 2-legged strength, mobility, single leg, push, pulls, all these things. And as coaches, as athletes, we know I don't know how to get better at those things, so I go see a coach. I go to a professional. I go have a personal trainer, a group trainer, whatever it is, and it makes sense because that's how our world tells us. If I want to get better at throwing and catching things, I need to go to somebody who really knows about throwing and catching things, how to get faster. I go to that person to get faster. But what happens with our brains is they work the same way, but we just kind of learn that we only go talk to someone, we only go figure something out when things are wrong. When our brain is going all haywire and crazy, that's when I go see somebody instead of looking at it a different way, and that's where I come in. That's what I do. So what I do is I work on what I call the mental performance competencies, the main things that go in your brain that make you better. These include things like motivation. Why do you do things? Confidence. Do you feel like you can actually accomplish it? And also make sure you're not overconfident, because that happens playing sport too, where we think, I'm the best there is, and then you step on the court and you get your mouth slapped, and it does not feel very good. So it's how do we bounce back and balance those things? Resilience. How do you bounce back once you get your mouth slapped? Then there's appraisal. Do you see things as challenges? Do you see them as threats, or are they learning opportunities for you to get better? Is the athlete who sees something as, I can learn from this, man, we're probably going to lose this game because this team's not lost in 5 years, but I can learn some things about myself, is a lot better than the person who walks into the competition like, all right, we lost. I mean, game start, but we're going to lose anyways, and just kind of shuts down and completely lets their brain say, nope, I don't care anymore. Then there's things like being aware of yourself, being able to handle stress. Are you someone that when you see your name on the roster or the game day, who your opponent is, yell tight like, I'm this, that, nope, that guy went to state last year, that girl went to state last year, I don't want to do this, I get very nervous, very anxious, I'm throwing up in the bathroom 10 minutes before the competition because I get so stressed about it. It happens. If it hasn't happened to you yet, look at all the young ones, at some point there's a good chance you're going to run into those scenarios. How do you regulate your emotions? Are you someone that can control when they get angry? When a referee makes a bad call, do you throw a hissy fit there? Or are you able to just move on and handle the fact like, well, they're human too. I can't do anything. Nothing I do is going to change their call. Are you focused? This is a big one to me because I can't tell you, between coaching, being in sports, all that, I've done something athletic here for 16 years, something like that. And I've had many coaches, many people tell me, focus, focus. But not once have I ever had anybody look at me and just see like, this is how you learn to focus. This is how you actually do focus. And I bet if I really looked around the room, and especially for the adults here, and asked you how many people have ever taught you in your life how to focus, there probably aren't a whole lot versus just having people yell at you like, focus on me, pay attention here. And that's not usually how it does, especially when you're a kid or a high schooler that has, as I've learned coaching, opinions. And they tend to not always be the same opinions I like, and trying to get them to focus off of those things is not the easiest thing in the world. Then there's how we interact with others. Are we leaders? Do we work as a team? Do we communicate with each other? When we're with coaches, when we're with our fellow athletes, how's our relationship there? Are we able to talk to our coach like, hey, coach, XYZ, Billy, Sally, and June are all pissed off right now. They feel like they're being overburdened, or you're someone that kind of just shies away and it's like knows there's a problem on the team but doesn't want to talk to coach because you're afraid. There's something in that relationship that needs fixing. Now, sometimes it's the coach that needs some attitude adjustment, but you can't control that, so you have to just work on what you can do. And then when you take all those pieces together, then we get to see the outer rim of things. The things that right now everybody focuses on is the mental health, the depression, the anxiety, things like that. But that affects all of these, and all of these are going to affect the mental health. If you're someone who's not prone to depression to begin with, it's going to be a lot easier to not fall into those depression symptoms if you're confident in your sport. Like, you're not going to be depressed over lost games, of lost things here, if you're already confident, know you can go back. You're going to be less likely to fall into those anxious feelings if you know how to deal with stress, if you have coping skills to that. So we work on all that, so hopefully you don't need the person that's got more licenses and a lot more student debt than I do. So that's all a lot of words, and I tend to ramble quite a bit on things. So to kind of summarize all those pieces, and what does it mean for you as athletes, for people who exercise, and even the people who are just trying to do better with their overall life, because what is work but performance of some kind? going back to the stockbroker earlier, they can benefit from these same things because they have to perform in business, they have to do well. Well, in simple terms, if you're focused more on the fitness things, this can look like overcoming movement fears. If you've ever, how many people here at some point have had some kind of injury? Okay. When you first came back from that injury, you worked with your doctors and all that. Was there ever that moment where you're kind of worried to do the thing that caused the injury again? A couple of you. Well, that's one of the things that I tend to work on. We get very good at getting people physically ready to come back from being hurt, but there's that little hesitation, that fear that we have to learn to overcome, and that's where I start. In fitness, we learn how to set better goals, so we learn how to set priorities. I know plenty of people that I've trained over the years, they have the goal of lose weight. Which is great, it's a great start, but how much? Why? What does that mean? What kind of weight? Where do you want to go with this? All those things, and it just leaves you in that hole of not really knowing, not being motivated because you see the scale do the funky things it does. Maintain motivation, dealing with setbacks. And then I have to, and then lastly, I help with behavioral change. So a big example I like to use is a trick I learned about myself in college is I hate research articles. As a grad student, you have to read lots of research articles, but I learned that I also hate sitting on a bike. But when I did the two things together, they sucked less than doing them separate. So I learned how to combine those things and does better. So sometimes we work on that. How can we make two things we hate go together so the total suckage time is less? I just have to endure that moment. For athletes, other things we do with overcoming mental barriers. Many of us have probably seen, even in the Olympics going on right now, there's certain athletes that are world class, have had best times, best performances. They should be odds-on favorite to win, and then they take like sixth. And you sit there like, why does that happen? A lot of times it's between the ears. Basketball player that dominates for 3 quarters and then in the last 2 minutes shoots free throws over the backboard and can't find the net if they paid somebody, that usually happens because what's going on between the ears. Then I focus on focus, lessening burnout, dealing with setbacks, and then the most important thing to me is finding balance. So for parents here who don't know, for the athletes who don't know, for the coaches who don't know, the unfortunate thing about athletics and high performance, it actually, as good as it can be for the mental health, it can also be very hard on the mental health because it's a lot more stressful. There's a lot more things going on. So finding a balance between, I still want to perform, but I also don't want to go crazy and bouncing off my head from not understanding things. All right. So now that hopefully you understand a little bit more about what I do, what that actually means for you as athletes, and that I like using examples of people who do things very well, and whether they work with someone for sure or just have some of these natural abilities, I wanted to demonstrate how that can look. So first, this guy took over the internet like a week ago. I am not going to try to butcher his last name because just look at it. I don't know it. I'm not going to even try. So I'm just going to refer to him as everybody else is, Pommel Horse Guy. This man has won. He competed for the men's gymnastics team, as many know, but some might not. He had one event. That event was the very last one, so he sat there for 3 hours. By the time his name was up, he had to do very well. And if he didn't, the team wouldn't get a medal again for the upteenth time in the US. So what does this man do? He either naps or meditates, depending on which source you want to read. How many people, if you had the whole world looking at you, knowing all the pressures on you, sitting there for 3 hours, would just be sitting there napping? Anybody feel like they would be like, nervous, got all this pent up things going on here. Well, I don't know if he's worked with anybody before, but I can guarantee you, if I go back to that list of the 12 competencies, he's got a lot of those things checked off either naturally or from things that he's done because he knows, just got to breathe. I'm going to get up there. I'm going to control what I can control. And I'm going to perform. And what does he do? He does it, gets us our bronze medal. Next one, not as popular here in Wisconsin, but still probably known for those of you who enjoy college football. J.J. McCarthy was the quarterback of the Michigan Wolverines last couple of years, and now one of the quarterbacks for the Vikings, but I don't talk about that team. Sorry, any Vikings fans in here. Not everybody's perfect, so I understand. But he got a lot of attention last year because before his games, he would sit there and meditate and get ready, get his mind focused. Now, a lot of people can look at him once again and think, oh, he's just a quarterback for a run-heavy team. All he's got to do is sit there, hand the ball off, make a throw every couple plays. And that's no pressure. There should be no issue there. Well, think about it. If I were to, with whatever team you work with, from track, basketball, baseball, if you got one opportunity every so often, you had to make that one moment count. Are you going to be nervous about it? Probably a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of nerves there. How does he handle it? He takes his meditation. He figures out how to just be present instead of worrying about, man, this is my one opportunity. If I throw an interception here, I'm not going to be able to throw again for the next 6 plays because all we're going to do is run it. Instead of thinking that, he's just like, all right, got to throw. There's how the defense is lining up. Throw, hopefully complete, unless he was playing Wisconsin. I hope he wasn't completing it, but I don't think they played last year, if I remember right. It's been forever. So, but there's once again an example of someone who understood, I know I don't get a lot of opportunities or a lot of pressure is being put on me, so how do I handle it? I take a step back and I relax my brain. And then finally, the great one, Simone Biles. A couple years ago, big thing was her dealing with her mental health struggles. Now, I don't know what her sports psychologist did, what level they all were at, probably the doctoral level stuff to handle a lot of that. But the meditation stuff, that's stuff anybody can do. That's what you can do, what you can start doing now to be ready, to be there, to handle not only the stresses of having the pressure of being everybody's focus, but also all the other things that can go on in your head. And I was very intentional why I chose these 3 people and why I chose them, because once again, they were demonstrating meditation, mindfulness things, which... So for our first thing that I want you to be able to take away, the little drill, the little something or so, is I want to give you a taste of this. So here's the first moment of me being a nerd. And I love this example because I feel like I can connect more with some youth than if I just try to explain it otherwise. So being a mindful athlete or being a Jedi. That's why I got into this. I look pretty cool to be a Jedi. But the comparison, as foolish as it may sound, really isn't as far-fetched. And the reason I say this is when you look at Star Wars, for those of you who might not be fans or might not have seen the stuff, you have these keepers of the peace that what they do most of the time is, like Yoda up there, they're sitting around, they're meditating, they're doing a little training here or there on things to keep their body strong. And then when the moment comes, when they're fighting the bad guys, when they have people that are coming at them, trying to threaten their world, trying to hurt them, they spring into action and they're able to either slice people apart, droids apart, or they're able to find other solutions. But by putting all that mental work in beforehand, they're able to act from a place of peace instead of just reacting to, oh, this is going on, I gotta do this, which might get them into trouble. And when an athlete is mindful, if you are to take a little bit of mindfulness, you're doing the same thing. Instead of, I'm trying to think of good. Basketball is always the best example because it's so there and back and forth. So a great example is to look at two athletes. Athlete A, they go up for a layup, they get swatted a little bit, there's probably some contact, but there's no call. Athlete A's response is they're not mindful, they're reacting from the storm. So what are they doing? They're getting angry, they're looking at the referee, they're saying like, what was that? They smacked me, they did this, why didn't you make that call? And what happens? Now it's a 5-on-4 on the other end, and the other team scores. The mindful athlete sits there, they get whacked, and though for a second they might be angry at, because it's natural to be angry, they take their breath, and then they get back down the field and say, I'm going to make this next play count, because I can't do anything about the last one. All I can do is keep playing. Like I said, figure out how to be that guy. Take the practice, be able to act from a place of peace and calm instead of just the anger, the hate, the whatever else you might be feeling there. So, how I'm going to introduce this and give you a little something to take away. Well, everybody stand up real quick. So a lot of times I like to start with mindful breathing from a seat, but most people it's very hard to, in sports, in fitness, to just sit and meditate when they get angry. Most of the time we're on our feet, we're running, we're moving. So I want to just show you how you can focus on the feeling in your feet, focus on your breath in a couple quick minutes, so that when you're in a situation like, all right, I gotta go do something, you can take a quick breath, focus, and then move on. And once again, when I normally do this with groups, sometimes I have people take off shoes because it feels better when you're in socks, but for the sake of the smell in a tight space today, I am going to leave that option off the table. And the second, instead of having us walk around so we're not crashing into each other, I'm just going to have a stand. So the first thing I want you to do, you can either have your eyes just open, gently hanging open, close, but just stand and just take a couple deep breaths in and out. Deep breath in and out. Now as you're standing here breathing, I want you to see if you can bring your attention and focus to the bottom of your feet. Can you feel your shoes? Can you feel the weight of your body against your foot? Still breathing in and out. Just feeling that for a moment. Now what I want you to do is slowly have yourself tilt from side to side. Still feeling your feet. Noticing how the weight changes. It goes from left to right. Then you come to a still with your breath again. Then try to tilt yourself forward to your toes, back to your heels. Noticing the shift and the feeling. Back to stillness. Take another breath in and out. Allow your eyes to open again when you're ready. And then with one more breath in, Sit down on the out breath, arriving and sitting. So, I think if I were to time that, that was probably about 2-3 minutes I had you do. Does anybody here feel a little calmer? Feel a little just more? I'm settled in. I'm ready. Couple people. So that's one of the first power. That's that first piece. And though it might be hard to think like, hey, I play football, I play volleyball, I run track. I almost said play track, but I hate when people say play track. How do I do this when I'm doing that? Well, the first thing is the unfortunate part is you have to practice this stuff more. The more you do those little things, the sitting in place, the easier it is to think about like, oh, what's it like when I move in? I have space now in my brain that's not just filled with a bunch of chaos. I can notice the birds chirping without being focused on them. The next piece is finding those moments where you can do it. Most of us at some point have timeouts, moments where we go to a bench, where we're walking to our blocks, the starting line, where we get to sit there and just kind of breathe for a minute, focus. Just imagine if you took that feeling you had right after the walk into your first event. First thing you did. Now, for some of us, like football, if you're playing defense and you have to go run into somebody as fast as you can, might not want to be that peaceful, but there's other things we can do for that that still keeps you calm without losing that. All right, I got to run through this person really hard and hope I don't bounce off of them. But that's beyond today. I can't give away all the secrets today, all the fun stuff today. So now that we've done that, I want to shift our focus into the other thing I want us to walk away with. Something that hopefully can help cultivate confidence in yourselves, help you discover a little bit of your motivation. And it comes down to better goals and understanding your why. So first off with goal setting. What is goal setting? Goal setting is the things we chase. It's something that sets us up to learn because setting a goal means I'm not there yet, so I have to figure out how I'm going to get there. So by having that there already, you know, oh, I'm going to learn something. It makes us accountable, especially when you tell people, like, here's my number one thing I always say. If you make a goal, you better tell someone about it, because if anybody's ever had a conversation with people, we get tired of talking about the weather. It's a lot more fun to ask somebody like, how's that goal coming? How's that coming? How's all that stuff going? You know, how'd the race go, or how'd the cap? Those things are a lot more fun to talk about than, yeah, not as humid as it was last week. You know, it's my hair's better. It ain't just great. It's a lot more fun to talk about goals and things that matter to us, because it also means the person that's listening and it all just feels better. And then going along with the stuff I've talked about already, goal setting creates a map. Well, if you do it right, it creates a map. Because if you think of your destination, if you think of goals you have, if you're just in a sport, if you're just doing things, you're like, I'm just doing it to do it. Then you kind of look at the whole experience like, man, that's a lot of work. I don't know how I get from there to there. But at least you have some goals, and then some smaller goals. You understand, oh, that's how I get there. I don't have to go through the canyon of death, despair, and pain. I get to go through the frolicking forest of flowers. And the frolicking forest is a lot more fun. Most of my goals have unfortunately gone through the forest of death, though, I feel like. Anybody ask you if you want to go to grad school, kids? Unless you have to, think twice about it. No, don't go do it. It's fun. Jason. The next thing I always like to talk about with goals before I get into setting goals is understanding the two different types. And I call these chasing ghosts or embracing happiness. chasing ghosts are the one that I see a lot of people make and do a lot, which they're fine. But in my eyes, most of the time we're chasing these ghosts. We're chasing things of what we're told we're supposed to like. I think I'm supposed to be skinnier, or I'm supposed to be more muscular. I think I'm supposed to make more money. I told the value of an athlete how many championships they won, so I guess my goal is to win championships. But at the end of the day, we're just chasing these ideas of what we're supposed to be. We're chasing these ghosts of people past instead of just being who we are. And if you've ever tried to, even if you catch up to that thing, even if you win X championships, if you try to hug that ghost, catch that ghost, it just slips through your fingers. Just look at, once again, basketball is always a fun example. Look at LeBron James right now. Arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time, if not the best. But what's his big thing he's always compared against? Michael Jordan. And depending on where you are in the argument, one's better, one's not. And if LeBron's whole thing is always just chasing to be Michael, at the end of these 20-some year career that he's going to end up having, he's probably going to feel empty, like, man, I didn't catch Michael, so I didn't accomplish my goal. I didn't become that thing. But I would guarantee most of you that at the end of the day, yes, he might think of being better than Michael from time to time, but his goal is to be the best LeBron James there is. It still won him a lot of championships, lost a few. It's scored him a lot of points. It's allowed him to become great, not because he's just trying to be MJ, but because he's trying to be LBJ, and it's worked pretty good for him. Fortunately, the focus ain't going, wait, what? And so the last piece on here that can't see is at times this might be necessary for sports, especially if you're on a team, because yeah, your coach probably wants to win a championship at some time or do something here. They might have other goals of seeing you guys all succeed. So one of your goals by proxy might be to win a championship, to become great through that. But sometimes if that's the only thing you're chasing, at the end of the day, you just leave not happy. And nobody likes to leave their heart and soul on the track, on the field, to not be happy. The way I try to help people set goals is by embracing happiness, for looking for happy. And what this means is we're setting goals that are focused on things we're passionate about, things that make impact in our lives, things that reward us internally. And it's very focused on the why. Why do you do this? Why are you in the sport? And then why is that goal going to help you accomplish this other why? And unfortunately, a lot of the old mindset, there's still coaches I fight now on this who, because all of their goals are this, they want all their athletes to have goals like this, because they're like, well, you can't be happy and great at the same time. You can't be this or that. And it's like, yeah, they think you can't have these big dreams, these big ambitions, and be satisfied at the end of the day because you'll never be the greatest. Well, here comes movie reference number 2 of somebody who set a really big goal, accomplished it, and then sat down and looked upon a grateful universe. This big purple guy, Thanos, here. For those of you who aren't Marvel fans or didn't see it, spoilers for an 8-year-old movie, he had this goal of wiping out half the universe's population for his own kind of crazy reasons. And spoiler, he did it. And then what did he do? At the end of the day, he sat on a planet, looked across the universe, and smiled. Now, that sounds like someone that set a goal, understood their why of why they did it, accomplished it, and then was happy with what happened, was able to retire on that. Now, I wouldn't set the goal of wipe out half the universe. That will probably land you on a lot of lists, probably ones that I don't even know exist. But you can take some of those lessons to your own life. So, as weird as the comparison is, it sounds, I'm going to use Mr. Thanos here as my example. So the first step in finding balance in the goals is understand your why. He knew his why because his planet didn't listen to him, his whole planet went extinct because they didn't wipe out half the population like he said would help them. So his big motivation, so the whole universe didn't go extinct, was to wipe out half. So that was a pretty strong why for him. He was driven by not seeing the same thing happen again. He was also probably a bit crazy, but so are most athletes at the end of the day, when you really think about it. Then what do? You set long-term goals, set his goal. Then you break it up into pieces and some short-term goals. So he didn't just go from sitting on his destroyed planet to snap his fingers and wipe away. Yeah, see, what do you have to do? He assembled his army, started there, collected the gauntlet, collected the infinities. He did all these little steps along the way so that at the end of the day, he reached this big goal and then could accomplish it. And then the one thing because didn't get to watch him behind the scenes of him, but I would tell most athletes is, once you set these short-term goals as well, reward yourself for them. One of the biggest things I get from both adults in business I work with to kids in athletics I work with is they're never satisfied. They're never happy with what they do. They get to a point where it's like, let's say example, graduate college. They're like, yeah, I'm going to go do this. They graduate. They spend 1 night with their buddies, 1 day with their parents, and then it's like, okay, what's next? There really wasn't a whole lot of enjoyment to it. One of the biggest things you see in college and professional sport is these I believe it was, I remember reading somewhere, I've been not able to find it again, but I believe it was Brett Favre after he won his first Super Bowl. Yeah, that night was pretty special, but pretty much the days after were kind of miserable because everybody's focus went from, you won the Super Bowl or going to Disney World, to, so you'll win the next one? You'll do that next? There's no moment to breathe and enjoy that win that they just have. So you gotta make sure you reward yourself too. I even fell into this trap. Many years ago, when I was in college, I coached for track and field down at DeSoto. We had our conference meet. The girls won the first time the girls had won their conference meet it was either ever or like 30, 40 years or something like that. We go to Culver's afterwards. Everybody's happy. And I had the nerve in my head look at my head coach Sin with my butter burger thinking about, so what are we going to do for the regionals lineup? So I'm not saying I'm perfect either, but that's where a lot of us go is we have these big moments. I should have been saying like, man, 30 years, 40 years. The first thing I should have had through my head is like, I promised these girls if they won, they get to dye my hair pink. And why did I make that call? But no, I was thinking about regionals already. And that's where we fall into that trap. And I want to help athletes not get there. All right. Doing good on time. I've only made 2 movie references so far. Darn. So my other draft of this script, I like using videos when I can, but I never trust Wi-Fi in places I go, so I didn't include this time. But one more to go back on this point of satisfaction versus chasing ghosts. And you can look up, there's these 2 clips of Jim Carrey that are very well done. The first one, he's at the Golden Globes or so, and he's getting called up to present this award. And when he's getting called up to present the award, the announcer makes a note of like, and 2-time Oscar winner Jim Carrey to present the award. And what does he start doing up there? Yep, that's right. Two-time Oscar winner Jim Carrey. I don't just dream the dreams of any normal people. I dream the dreams of a two-time Oscar-winning actor, Jim Carrey. And when I go to bed tonight, I'll think about myself when becoming three-time Oscar winner, because he goes into this whole spiel. It's played for laughs because it's Jim Carrey, but you can really see the heart of that. Like, yeah, I'm two-time, but all anybody cares about is me being three-time. And then there's a perfect counter clip to that when he's doing the movie tours for Sonic 2. And he's announcing his retirement. And he looks at the reporter as he's saying this, and it's like, you'll probably never hear this from another Hollywood actor, but I've done enough. I am enough. I just feel good. It was just time for him to go. And he said, like, if something blew my mind, I'd come back for it, but I am enough. And that's for every athlete, every team that I work with. That's always my goal, is at the end of the athlete's career, whether or not they are done in middle school, high school, college, or professional, to at the end of the day be looking back on that career, however long it is, and said, I did enough, I am enough. I don't have to sit here thinking about, like, what if I would have done this different? What if I would have been here different? Because as someone who's been there and experienced, it just sucks because you can't go back. So my main goal is always to have the athletes end their career knowing I'm satisfied, I am enough, but still know they can chase greatness in that time frame. So, with enough of the preaching, my last thing for us to take away, and this one you actually literally get to take away with you. So, this is a little goal saying sheet that I put together. One of the most common types of goals you'll see is called SMART: specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-oriented. Great model, all that. I've had taught to me so many times. I've had to teach it so many times. I get bored of it. So you get to do something different, something you probably aren't going to see as often, but I think is just as effective. And it's called WHOOP. And it's also a lot more fun to say than SMART, because whoop, just more fun. And WHOOP is this idea of wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan. I add extra W in there and ask your why. Now, like I said, you don't have to fill this out now, but this is a perfect time to fill out. So if you have questions, you can ask someone who does things like this for part of his living. But the first category, the why. I want you to think about why do you do the sport you do? Is it to impress somebody? I'd be lying if part one of my goals why I got in track, because there are some pretty girls on the track team, but I digress. I go back. But that didn't end up being my final why. My final why got to be the fact that it was a place that quieted all the craziness in the brain. I could just be relaxed and enjoy the moment. So that's where I really start getting to my why. For some people, your why might be, my parents are making me do it, and that's it. And that's a conversation you'll probably have sometime down the line. Others, it might be, my grandfather was a runner back in the day, always loved talking to me about running, distance running, and I started taking after that. Then once you know that why, then you can look at the back of the sheet, and that's where the WHOOP comes in. The W stands for wish. What are you trying to do? Might be to lose weight. It might be to run this time. It might be to make a starting lineup. It might be to do this, to be this. Whatever it is, just what is that wish? And then think about what the outcome of that is. So once you accomplish it, like, what does that really mean? So if I run this, you guys told me cross country, and we'll use that as a sample. So if you run X time, you're going to be on the regional roster probably if you do this or that. If your goal is to get X amount of reps in on the throwing machine or whatever it is at that time, you're going to have a better chance of making the starting lineup. That's your outcome. For fitness people, I use, if my goal is to lose weight, my outcome might be it'll be easier for me to get up and down off the floor to play with my kids, and so on. Then what I usually have people do, and can either do this now, later, or never, depending on how much you enjoy what I say, is before you get into this stuff, look at this and see how it matches with your why. If your goal is to win championships, but your why is to have fun and be the best version of yourself, that might not completely overlap. So though your wish might still be good, it might mean I should make sure I have some other ones too, so that if I don't hit this, I can still be happy with where I'm at. Once you've done that reflecting, done that thinking, the last piece is obstacle and plan. So at some point, you're going to have a hurdle. You're going to have something that's going to get in your way. And most of the time, we make goals, we have plans, and we sit there expecting things to just go right. They don't, and then we sit there like, I failed. But that's not how you get there. So with the obstacle piece, think about what could get in my way? Why might I not run that time? Why might I not lose the way I want to lose? Why might I not do this or that I want to do? Think about it. And then the P part, have a plan. See, like, if I get stuck here, I'm going to talk to coach about doing this, or I'm going to investigate this. I'm going to, back to the fitness example. If I want to lose weight, I know all this. I know that I really like chocolate cake. I really like chocolate cake and cookies and ice cream, hence in great shape, but not as great as I probably would be if I had fewer cookies in my life. But those fresh bun cookies from Quick Trip, especially right now, are just right there. So I know that's my poor diet piece. My plan is I'm going to go to my coaches, I'm going to go to my trainers, my other doctors, and figure out about finding someone to work with me on nutrition, how to overcome that. So that's the why and whoop. So what I'm going to do now, it's 7:23-ish, 2-ish, probably a little longer than I want, but I'm going to let you guys work on this if you want. For those of you who have questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll call people, answer anything. If nobody has any questions, I'll probably do my summary and finish, but take some time, work on this if you want. And if you have questions on anything else, you can ask that now too. So work, questions. Otherwise, I'm going to start asking for Bueller. Bueller, there's number 3. None of them got that, right? Oh, my parents back there and coaches, you got Bueller, but none of them. You all can ask your parents later, what is Bueller from? All right. Does anybody have any questions on the whole hour of me rambling? Nobody. Yep. So the first thing that usually comes down to me, just because of where my background is, I'll put a caveat on this with my power lifters and coaching. I don't do a whole lot of my stuff that I do for business because just from an ethically getting in their brains when you're already the coach is kind of like, shut up, coach. So sometimes I'm careful there. But the first thing comes is I build my relationship. I have my rapport just through my normal conversations with them. I start to read how some of them are. The mindfulness piece is great for some athletes. Some athletes are really great at just accepting what's in the moment, accepting that I got to take my breath, just got to redirect inward and clear my brain for a second. Others are very control oriented, and unless I get hour-long sessions with them, I'm not breaking the habit. So what I'll have people do is, say like, do you have bracelets or so? Can we have these visual cues that you can look at? Like, I'm pissed off right now, have that bracelet. I had a athlete once who had a friend die of cancer. So they always had their friend's bracelet with them that, fight for whatever's name. So when they would get in these moments of chaos, when the brain's there, I'd have them focus on that so they remember, like, oh yeah, this isn't just about me. This is about all this other. This is about my why. So it depends. But breathing and shifting focus is where I go to. Yep. Anyone else? Yeah. I haven't collected enough true data on it to see exactly if there's certain spots. Now, Grant, there are certain sports that are going to change things. So runners, golfers, tennis players probably need to focus a little bit less on like some of this stuff just because of how individual things can be versus basketball, football, sports where they're literally yelling at each other every play. But doesn't mean that they don't need some of that stuff. It just means less that we have to focus on. Um, not my data, but from what I know from my friends, both from what I've noticed coaching and from what I've seen from my friends that teach and coach at the high school level. I'm calling y'all out right now. This is a big issue, especially post-COVID, post things for those athletes, just focusing and dealing with stress because there was so much stress for so long. Not every people either learned how to cope, or they didn't, and now they just live in a constant state of I'm stressed, I'm kind of not stressed, I'm stressed more, I'm kind of not stressed. So, but usually the other bias I'd say is I get like this is the thing people notice first about themselves. So it's the thing I guess I get a little bit more. So those are kind of the 3-4 spots I would say is where people come to me more. Okay. Anybody else got any questions? First thing is making sure that you have things outlined and really have those culture talks. So some coaches do, some don't, but like here are our cultural standards, our goals, and have this. But then it's what I started doing with my powerlifters last year is I have my ideas like what I want the powerlifting team to do. I wrote that up. And then I took my seniors one day after school when we didn't have practice with everybody else, and we just sat for about an hour and a half, and had kind of a culture meeting. I had all of them write down, like, what are some values that you have for this team? Like, what are some values you think are important for this powerlifting team? What are the goals that you think this team should have? And then I had them talk about, look at, and then for me, it came down to putting a little bit of my ego aside too, of like, my goals aren't the end of the world for everything. It's like, what do they also, and kind of give them especially the seniors, a little bit of buy-in of like, this is what I want my senior year to look. This is how I want to define this year, so that there's that piece. I guess it's trying to formulate it all real quick, and what I found both with my powerlifters and actually in the research article I put out, it was a little bit on the team cohesion stuff. One thing I've noticed is when I've had athletes, both in college and high school, write down the top 4 values for the team, almost every time I've ran it now, the core values they've come up are the things that the team sucks at, and they want to put focus there. And it means they recognize it, and now that's the focal point of, okay, now we know, like, you want to work here, I also want to do this. How can we merge this to one vision? Does that make sense, or does that answer things? And then the other piece for the coach's sake is sometimes also relook at your whys and your goals, making sure things are where you want it, and really focus on what the people you care about and what everybody there would say. Like, they, family wants you to be happy, this, that. They want you to have a life outside of just being this, where society's focused on how many championships you won, this is, and really look at that too, of like, man, am I listening to society and the ghost, or am I listening to myself and the people who actually matter in my life? So, yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I'm not going to ask for funny jokes because I don't trust this front row over here. All right. So with that, that's the end of the main piece of the